from my country. But I pray for the police, please inspire them to keep the peace. Oh, Father, I pray for the judge and the jury and those who begging for them mercy. Oh, Father, I pray and I pray, I pray and I pray. I pray for the good and the bad man. I pray and I pray, I pray and I pray.
So blessed morning to your wonderful listeners of Real FM 91.9, 91.5. And it is another Wednesday morning. It's a brighty Wednesday morning. The sun is up after all these days of rain. I trust it remain that way because we need the soil to drain, you know. Although we need the water, there are some places that is so happy for it. I am also grateful for the water for the last few days. But whenever you hear my voice, and that is your humble servant, Jessel Grant, Sergeant of Police, Eastern Division, Community Relation Department, you know it is the conversation with the RGPF, yeah? And I am privileged and delighted to have my guest, or this guest, in studio with me this morning. However, you soon would get to know, I told you it would have been a special program this week. I know you're probably saying, well, how comes I'm here in Jammu and not Keturah? Well, as usual, when CRD or police and the community working together, because bear in mind, that is our intention for us to bond. That is our intention for us to build that relationship. Oftentimes, we need to give community a hearing. So there are some persons within society that understood the program, has been listening, and gave their advice and suggestion in terms of the theme song. And while we were searching and we were looking for a song, my colleague, Constable Callis, came up with this version or this tune from a Jammu. And it was just a blessing that this morning we've decided to make that switch. And here why we decided to make that switch this morning. And it was intentional. It just didn't show on which day, but I wanted to do the switch when I had a senior person in studio with me. So those of you who is streaming Real FM, you would realize why I'm happy, because my officer, my direct admin officer, is in studio with me and he's my guest this morning. So that gives the privilege to even change our theme song. So going forward, as of this Wednesday and every other Wednesday, unless we've decided to come up with something else that overrides this tune of a Jammu, this would be our theme song. We say thanks to Keturah George under Police Brutality 2012, but we are now under a Jammu, Pray for the Country, in the year of 2003, and now we're in 2023. So I think that is enough, because I was told for the cricket fans, there is cricket live, and the program would be cut short this morning due to cricket, but you still will be getting the information. So just in case I forget, hear what? If you hear something, know something, see something, I urge you to say something so that our relationship can be better, faster, and that part of the puzzle that you may just have, we can able to solve it in the interest of all. And bear in mind, CRD Eastern Division is housed at Lackwas Building, Gladstone Road, upstairs the Parliamentary Office. Our contact number 406-0193. And on that note, I give you a short stint of a Jammu, because we have to get accustomed with Pray for the Nation, and then we hit right back within the program, because we're not sticking. Time is very short this morning, okay? So we hear the conversation with the RGPF, short piece of a Jammu, and we'll be right back with our program this morning. I know I did not say the topic, and that is also intentional. See you.
And I am a prayer for my country. Righteousness exalts the nation, but sin is a reproach to any man. Pray for my country.
Yes, and we continue to pray for our country and work together with country. So it's not just police, but it is police and community working together for the better of the Tri-Island State, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and also all of our visitors and whoever within the diaspora it's the Isle of Spice, regardless to what, right? So this morning, as I say, I am delighted to have my direct supervisor in studio with me. And I say good morning and welcome to you, sir, to the conversation with the RGPF. I am certain and positive this is not your first program in studio, but the first program in line of being the officer in charge of the Community Relation Department. And I failed to say your name because I want you to do that, so go right ahead.
Good morning to you, Sergeant. Good morning to all your listeners. It's a pleasure for me to be here after such a long time. I was directed to introduce myself, so my name is Simon Douglas, and I'm an Assistant Superintendent of Police, the officer in charge of Police Community Relations Department.
Right. So, and again, I will do something that I don't normally do, sir. This morning's topic would be on what?
Right. So this morning we're going to be speaking about noise. Noise as it relates to the Noise Control Act.
Right.
Yes.
Listeners, this is the season, or one of these seasons, where noise is often being used or committed or done, right? And it is important from a law enforcement standpoint that you have an understanding as for the law as to what are your limits, your boundaries, what is your do's and don'ts. And with all of ASP Douglas' background, I think he is more than competent to speak on the topic. So we go straight into it, and I'll just ask him, in terms of the Noise Pollution Act, so to introduce the program, what would you really want to say to our listeners at the start?
Okay, thank you again. If I'm to say it in just a few words, I would say, do not disturb anyone with your noise. But I have the opportunity to use more than a few words.
Definitely.
So first, I want to let the public know, I know that there are some persons who try to follow, when there are legal matters being discussed, they try to follow by looking at the laws that govern those issues. So the Noise Control Act, you can find that in Chapter 211A of Volume 10 of the Laws of Grenada. And I also want to say to the public that excessive noise can be really, really, really disturbing or annoying to anyone. And it is even more a nuisance at nights and to persons who wish to sleep, wish to study, senior citizens, people with health challenges, and so on are even more significantly affected by noise. Right? Excessive noise have the capability of making someone sick, and it also can worsen someone's condition if they're already sick.
Right.
So this is a special appeal. So we're not here only to tell you what the law says. It is a special appeal to everyone to be responsible and considerate in your efforts, your drive to have fun, to make money, and all of those things. We must consider the other person who is going about their normal business and do our best not to disturb or annoy them with our noises.
Right. So on that backdrop, what are some of the noise or types of noise permits that we have here in Grenada?
Okay, so many people are not aware that in order to perform or to conduct construction work, whenever the intention is to use heavy equipment and so forth, that requires a noise permit. Mm-hmm. And that permit can be obtained from or through the Minister of Health. So if you intend to conduct construction work, especially those that require the use of loud and heavy equipment, you must make an application to the Minister of Health for a noise permit for that purpose. The second permit, of course, is for the use of a loudspeaker or musical instrument, and that permit is obtained from the Commissioner of Police. So those are the two types of permits that can be obtained.
Right. So can I just guide you astray in terms of where we want to take the program, the fact that we are in the festive season, and place some emphasis as to what is the process one should go through in applying for these permits?
Okay. I should have given this information at the start, so if you permit me just to give a little bit of understanding surrounding the topic noise, and a definition of noise given by the Act is sound. So noise means sound, and it may include vibration. So you notice that it doesn't say music. It doesn't say any particular thing. So noise, according to this act, the Noise Control Act, can be any sound and any vibration. Right? Noise pollution, which is the major issue, means any harmful or annoying sound or vibration or sound that amount to a nuisance.
Right.
So if your music or whatever you're doing that creates noise is harmful to anyone, I did indicate that it can make people sick and so forth. If it is annoying to anyone, if it becomes a nuisance, then you can be contradicting the law. Right? And for those who do not understand what a nuisance means, it's an unreasonable interference with the rights of another. So if your music interrupts the neighbor in what they're trying to do at their home, then that constitutes a nuisance. All right? So we move into the process for applying for a noise permit. Now, I must say from the onset that Section 18 of the Act mandates that an application for a noise permit must be made to the nearest police station, and that's nearest to the location of the intended event, no later than 10 days before the date of the intended event. And it's been actually a practice, I would say a norm, for persons to send in applications 2 days before, 3 days before, 5 days before the intended date of the activity. And we have been on a campaign with this issue in recent times, the RGPF, letting the public know that should your application reach later than that time, you may find that it may not be considered or it may not be granted. Now, the reason for this is that there is a vetting process that has to be conducted. And it has to be conducted every time an application is made. So it's not a case of we know Baines Disco and we don't need to do a vetting because we're used to having applications from them. No. Every occasion has to be treated on its own merit. So a proper vetting has to be done every time. That requires officers to actually go to the scene, speak to persons sometimes. It is important that the police, the commissioner of police, understands the character of the persons involved. So the applicant, the person on whose behalf they are applying, all of these things need to be checked out before a decision can be made.
And if I were to interject,
yes,
it also guides, because every activity have a different spin-off.
Of course.
Because you may apply for the same location for a dinner and it can be solely appropriate. But then if you want to do a dance or some other activity, you may want to do increase your security measure as per the building and personnel. So it is even more important for the vetting. Of course,
you got that quite right. Things like the what's happening around there at the particular time, because you may find you applied last week and you were the only person having an activity in that area. And this week there might be somebody else who already has permission for an activity in that area. So all these things would affect the issue of the vetting. So it must be done on every occasion. And I can venture to say that the Commissioner of Police has made it now mandatory that specific matters be addressed during that vetting process. So it's not a case anymore of an officer saying, well, I think it's okay to grant that permit. They must provide the answers to a list of questions before a decision can be made whether or not that permit will be given. And as you rightfully said, what conditions that will be attached to that permit are also determined through the vetting process. All right, so the application must be made in writing, either by delivering a hard copy or by sending in an email to the police. And I cannot overemphasize that it must be done no later than 10 days. That document must inform of the name, address, and contact information for the applicant and also for the person on whose behalf the application is being made. So you may have an individual making an application on behalf of a group, an organization, or the owner of an institution may make an application on behalf of a promoter who wants to have an activity at his place. Yeah. So both sets of information must be included. Who is applying and who will be hosting or having that event. The date of the intended event or the intended date of the event, the time within which you intend to host that event. So you must give a start time and an end time. And of course, the place and the purpose of having the event or the type of event you're having. So it's not enough to just say, I am asking for a permit to play music at this place at this time. You must say what is the activity that you're having. So it's a soca show, it's a reggae show, it's a birthday party. Those information must be included in that application. All right? So that's about it for the application process.
Well, I think you jumped me there because within the application process, you would have also given the necessary information that should be. But I still want to ask, apart from the application process, is there any other necessary information that should be within that application?
Yes, I believe I basically outlined
everything
that are mandatory. If there is any additional information that you as the applicant believe would assist in the process, of course you should include those information.
Right. And in today's era, I just want to add a contact number.
Yes.
Just in case.
I did indicate contact information.
Okay,
so we must have, because the persons involved in the process may wish to contact you to clarify certain things or to inform you of certain things. You may need to make adjustments. For example, you may apply for a permit to have an event from 4 in the afternoon to 2 in the morning. And based on all circumstances, it is not reasonable. So you may be contacted and told that this time is not really practical. So you need to make adjustments. The police may suggest a time, or they may ask you to suggest an adjusted time. So all of these things need to be done within that whole process before a decision can be made.
Right. So listeners, bear in mind this morning, the conversation with the RGPF, we are discussing the Noise Controlled Act, and it is very important and pertinent in case you just tuned in or you step away and you're back. In studio with me is ASP Douglas, in charge of the Community Relation Department, and it is a time when you need those necessary information. And if it's not a reminder, please bear in mind. But you can always contact the various stations to have that information in the event you think of hosting an activity to raise some genuine funds. But we'll continue, ASB, in terms of the program. And in regards to the topic that we are discussing, the Noise Controlled Act, what are some of the conditions within that application that we just spoke of?
Right. So conditions are not fixed. There are some that are general, which would be on most, if not all, permits. But there are some that may be assigned or attached to particular circumstances. For example, I recall Deputy Prince referring to a situation where one of the conditions in a permit was that the speakers being used must be turned inwards. You know, most people want their speakers to be outside so that everybody within the community can hear it. And based on the circumstances, it was believed that that would have created an unnecessary problem. So one of the conditions in that particular case was to turn the speakers inwards so that the persons within the building would hear it and not the persons outside. All right, so I have with me a copy of a permit, and I'll just run through the conditions listed on this one, because most of them are what I would refer to as generic conditions, all right? So the first one says that the granting of a permission to operate a musical instrument shall not be deemed to constitute an authorization to create or maintain a significantly higher volume of sound than is reasonably necessary to satisfy the primary purpose for which the musical instrument is being operated. This is simply saying that the fact that you received a permit does not mean that you can play your music at any volume. All right, it must be reasonable. And remember that your music must be played to satisfy the primary purpose, which is you're having a dance. The people outside in the community, outside of the building, are not part of the dance. So who needs to hear that music? Are the people that are within that building are part of that party. So your music must be played at a volume that they can enjoy it, but that it does not disturb anyone else who is not part of it. All right? 2, the musical instrument shall not be operated in such a manner that by reason of the level of noise emitted, it unreasonably disturbs persons participating or attempting to participate in religious meetings, etc. And this has hinge to it. The fact that a religious meeting may take place at locations that they're not usually held. So, for example, it doesn't have to be close to a church. Right. There could probably be a crusade in a particular area where normally the church doesn't have activities. So your music must not disturb any such gathering or activity related to a religious meeting. It must not disturb persons living or residing in the neighborhood. So we mentioned that before, but just to emphasize it. Excuse me. 3, the musical instrument shall not be operated within a compound of or near to a hospital, health center, clinic, or any premises used either ordinarily or occasionally as a daycare center for young children. So anywhere close to these locations, and this takes us back to the vetting process. If your location for your activity is close to any of these locations, these institutions, that will lead to a conclusion that may be unfavorable to you, because we have an issue of people not being able to control themselves and not adhering to conditions. So it might be a good idea for you to consider a different venue if you want to succeed in getting your permission. And if you do succeed, you must adhere to the conditions, especially this one that says you must not disturb those persons. All right, it must not be within or near the compound of a school during school hours. And it must not be in such a manner that the level of noise given off unreasonably disturb any person in the hospital, health center, clinic, school, and so forth. 4, there shall be no obstruction of the free flow of traffic. No other traffic regulation shall be violated. So if your event leads to unnecessary obstruction in the free flow of traffic, or if any other traffic regulations are being infringed by your patrons, then you may run into a problem of your permit being revoked. So it means, therefore, that the promoter, the organizer, must take steps to ensure that these things do not occur. All right?
I want to make an interjection here.
Yes.
On the term of revoke, I want you to use community language. So in that case, what can happen?
Okay, so your permission or your permit may be taken back.
Right.
All right? Your authorization to have the event may be stopped or withdrawn.
Right.
And I'm trying to use language that...
Yes, because
Yes.
I want all to understand.
All right? The validity of the permit, including the terms and conditions, may be modified or cancelled. So that your question just drove me straight into the next condition. The validity of the permit may be modified or cancelled by the issuing authority for the maintenance of law and order or for any valid reason without serving prior notice to the applicant. So the police may just come to you and say, you have to stop the music. Yes, it will be reasonable to give you an explanation, but it's not in every situation you will be given a full explanation. So they can ask you to stop it, or they can ask you to make adjustments. So the condition I spoke of earlier, you may have been playing your music with your speakers outside of your building and so forth, and based on the circumstances, you may be told to put your speakers on the inside. That's an adjustment. You may be told to turn down the volume of the music,
Right.
things of that sort. All right? The permit is void immediately if used in conjunction with any illegal activity or unlawful assembly. So if you apply for a permit, for example, for a birthday party, and then the police realizes that you're having, for example, striptease taking place, then your permit becomes void there and then. So the police doesn't have to give you any explanation, just simply let you know that this is why your permit is being revoked. This permit must be produced for the inspection forthwith, if so required by a police officer, and failure of which the operation of the musical instrument shall immediately cease. So this brings me to a very important point, that there are several promoters or organizers of activities who apply for a permit, inquire whether the application was approved, but do not pick up that application. And I want to take a few seconds here to stress on this point.
Sure.
You must pick up that application because that's the only way you will know the conditions attached to the application. Like I said, you may have applied for a particular time and you may not have been given that same time. You may have been given a shorter time. You may have been given a time to start later than you intended. If you do not pick up that application, that permission, that permit, you will not be aware of the conditions attached. So it's very important that the permit be picked up and read through thoroughly and understood. And if for some reason there are conditions that you do not understand, then you should seek an explanation from the police so that you show that you stay within the law. And of course, if you do not pick it up like this condition says and you're not able to present it to a police officer, then your permit can be revoked. Right? This permit must be produced, we've gone through that. 9, a second warning by officers of the Royal Grenada Police Force as to the noise being unreasonable would result in the confiscation of equipment and closing down of the activity. Well, of course, if your equipment is confiscated, unless you have a backup, your activity will be closed. All right? And I think I want to stress this one as well. Too often we have situations where police officers go to a venue, speak to persons, and first of all, the reaction is not good. And secondly, as soon as the officers leave, we go back to exactly what we were spoken to about. So I want to sound this warning, especially beginning this carnival season, that is going to be no more. Right? Drinks must be served in plastic or paper cups. That's one of the conditions. If that is attached, then you must ensure that that is done. The music must be stopped at, and each permit will give you a specific time. So that's one of the conditions as well. The music must be stopped at whatever the time is that was given attached to that permit. Now, at the end of that, there is a note here, very important. Failure to comply with these conditions will result in the cancellation of this permit and render you liable for criminal prosecution. Right? So that's an example of some of the main conditions that are attached to permits.
Well, I'm so grateful that you took the opportunity and to use an exact permit or an example, a specimen as to what are they, because oftentimes the issue of the bottles, drinks being served in bottles, is really a challenge for law enforcement enforcing it, and also the safety of the patrons and also the organizer of those activities.
You're quite right about that.
Let us look at an abatement notice, because you spoke under the conditions in the confiscation of the equipment and in terms of what's supposed to adhere to and failure to what can happen. When we speak to an abatement notice, what is it we're talking about?
Okay, so an abatement notice is as the word implies, a notice, a document served by a police officer to a person responsible for a nuisance caused by noise, directing them to do one of two things. It can be either to stop the noise completely or to reduce the effect of the noise, meaning simply turn down the volume. All right? And that will be done when the commissioner is satisfied that there is noise that amongst a nuisance, or there's likely to be noise that will become a nuisance. So even if the music is not yet playing, but you are setting up for an event or activity in a particular area, and in the assessment of the commissioner, that noise, that music is going to create an unnecessary nuisance, although a nuisance is never necessary, but create disturbance, unnecessary disturbance to anyone, the commissioner can serve you a notice or a noise abatement notice to let you know that you should not start playing that music. All right, and I'll just jump right to the confiscation of equipment as we speak of this. If after being spoken to, being served notice that you're creating a nuisance and that you should abate or stop that nuisance, the police has to return to you. Then the law gives the police the authority to confiscate the equipment that you're using for the purpose of playing that music. All right, and then section 22, subsection 3 of the Act gives the police that authority. So all your equipment involved in that process, the speakers, the wires or cables, the computer or the turntable, your amplifiers, everything can be confiscated. And it can eventually be forfeited, meaning taken away from you completely when it goes to court. Right? So it's very important that when you're served a notice that you adhere to the notice and do not continue or resume that nuisance. I can give you an example. In St. George's recently, there's a gentleman whose equipment was confiscated and he was charged, and I'm almost certain that those equipment will be forfeited when that matter comes up in court.
Wow. We had an issue like that a couple of years back on the western side. I'm not sure of the outcome, but Victoria had a situation of that nature. So I think especially the organizers and the operators of the musical set, they have knowledge, but it's just how much that aspect is enforced by law enforcement.
And it's important to note that it doesn't matter who that equipment belongs to.
Definitely.
So saying to the officer, well, it's not my set, it's Tom Jones' set, doesn't make a difference.
Right.
Any equipment, any instrument that forms part of that musical system can be forfeited regardless of ownership.
Right. ASP, I want to put you here now on a position because at the start of the program, normally our program is 1 hour, but because of cricket this morning and RealFM is that of a fan, they have to bring it. As a result, we need to cut short our program.
Yes.
So there is 2 salient topics that are pointers under noise pollution that or the Noise Control Act that we need to look at. But in my lame knowledge, I think we touched some of the offenses thus far, although I don't know what you have.
Yes.
But I also want us to look at the aspect of noise from motor vehicles. Because here what? There's a particular party place in St. Andrews, and I'll leave it wide as St. Andrews. Whenever he shuts off his music on a Friday night, persons within the community complains. And when he was engaged, his story was, it's not me, I shut down as per time, but the patrons would go to the side of the road, turn up their speakers in their vehicle and have their party there. So I really hope that we can touch that as opposed to the offenses, but based on what you're comfortable with noise coming from motor vehicles or vehicles in general.
Right, and I'm glad you wanted to touch that because it's very important. Now remember I said noise, any noise whatsoever, regardless of where it's coming from, all right? So section 21 of the Act says, I'll try to read it briefly, any person who, without written permission from the Commissioner of Police, drives or permits to be driven a motor vehicle on a road, when that vehicle makes excessive noise from its engine, exhaust, radio, tape deck, air horn, or any other part or equipment attached, whether such equipment is built into the vehicle or not, and whether for the reproduction of music, speech, other song or otherwise commits an offense. So I think that is very clear. Any noise that comes from your vehicle that is excessive and creates a nuisance, and you have not received a permit from the Commissioner of Police for the production of that noise, you commit an offense. So this is an appeal to the persons who have the heavy songs in their vehicles, that you're not allowed to do that without having first received permission from the Commissioner. And also it's an appeal to police officers, and it's sad that I have to say this here, but the police officers, that they should enforce this section of the law as well, and not just in relation to the building and the big speaker boxes therein.
Right.
Yes.
In regards to offenses, I'm looking closer to the time. Is there anyone that you think is of great significance. It's not that any is above the other, but you would like to bring to the fore based on its repetition.
Right. Failure to adhere to the terms of a noise abatement notice, that's an offense. Playing music without permission or without a permit for the purpose of entertainment, parties, and so forth. If you do that without having obtained a permit, that's an offense. All right, and there's a list of offenses that you can be charged for, a long list, I would say. And it has not been very common that people get charged for them. But like I said, we're now on a drive, we're on a campaign to deal with the issue of noise. So all those offenses will be explored going forward.
Right, right. Well, I know I have rushed you and I pushed you a bit than the way you really would want to address that topic. But as per usual, my guests do not end the program without leaving that impact remarks or last few words with our guests that even if they miss the program, something can resonate with them. I give you the next few seconds.
Thank you very much. I want to end on the note that I started by appealing to everyone to be reasonable and to be responsible. If you want to entertain yourself and your friends, do so that you do not disturb anyone else around you. Because what may be entertainment for you may be disturbance to someone else. So keep your music, keep whatever noise you're making, keep it reasonable. And if you intend to have any function where you will use loud amplified music, please ensure that you apply for the necessary permit to do so. Consider the aged, the sick, the young children, and people who are studying and so forth. Consider them in all your doings and be responsible and reasonable. Thank you very much.
Thank you also. And this has been another program, The Conversation with the RGPF. While it was short, it was salient, it was to the point and very informative. I say thank you, ASP Douglas, for joining in from St. George's to be here with us just to give our listeners those reminders. To you, our wonderful listeners of RealFM 91.9 and 91.5, it has been a privilege to have a program with you. But bear in mind, the last 3 programs has been interlapping. We all share the same information. If you see something, know something, hear something, we urge you to say something, and in so doing we can better serve you. CRD Eastern Division can be reached on 406-0193. God bless you. Next Wednesday with another program, The Conversation with the RGPF. Bye for now. Be safe, stay good, and let us continue to talk with you and not about you. Bye.
Sick and tired of all the confusion.